Hi class! This week you're going to start using the MathPad editor inside of WileyPlus, and it always confuses students, so I thought I'd just show you how to use it real quick. So I'm going to go into our class, and the first assignment where you're really going to have to use it is for homework 2.1. So I'm going to show you a couple different of the exercises in here. So I'm going to start with exercise 7. Says, give the relevant proportion using correct notation. Your answer should be an expression of composed symbols, and then they give you a bunch of examples. And then they tell you a survey conducted of 1,060 randomly selected U.S. teens aged 13 to 17 found that 605 of them say they have made a new friend online. So for this one, we're doing a couple things here. So first of all, we need to give the relevant proportion. And second thing is we need to use correct notation. So that's where this MathPad editor is going to come in. So let's first talk about the relevant proportion here. The problem tells us that they did a survey of 1,060 randomly selected U.S. teens and found that 605 of them said that they made a new friend online. So in order to figure out the correct notation, then the first thing that we need to do is figure out if this data came from a sample or a population, because depending on which one it came from, the notation is going to be different. This one says we did a survey and we only talked to 1,060 randomly selected teens. So this one came from a sample rather than the entire population. So we know it's a sample because they didn't talk to all teens. They talked to just some randomly selected teens. So the sample notation for a sample proportion is p hat. So I'm going to click on edit here, which brings up my MathPad editor. And in order to make the p hat symbol in MathPad, if I look at all these options here, there's one with a hat over it. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to put the p inside there, and then I'm going to use the right arrow key to get out from underneath the hat to do the rest of the problem. So then I'll say equals, and now I need the appropriate proportion. Remember, to compute a proportion, you're going to have kind of a part over a whole. It's just essentially a fraction that we've turned into a decimal. So that fraction, the part is the 605, and the whole is the 1060. So on my handy dandy calculator here, I'm going to take 605 divided by 1060, and I get 0.570754717. In our class, 3 decimal places is usually a pretty good number to round to. So if I round to 3 decimal places, that ends up being 0.571. So then I would hit save and close, and I would submit my answer, and it's going to tell me it's correct. So that's the first example I wanted to show you. The second example is exercise 21. In exercise 21, we're going to be comparing 2 proportions. So we want to look at the difference in these proportions. So it says the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the U.S. tells us in 2010, unemployment rate for high school graduates with no degree is 9.7%. And the unemployment rate for college graduates with a bachelor's degree is 5.2%. So we want to find the difference in the proportion of those unemployed between the 2 groups and give the correct notation for the difference with a minus sign. Then it goes on to tell us that because this data came from a census, then this is population data. So remember, when they do the census every year, they're actually measuring everybody in the population. So because this came from a population, we're going to use the notation for population proportion, which is just p. But when we're comparing 2 groups, we want to give the p a subscript so we know which group that it came from. So we're going to use p1 and p2. So let's look at how we would do that here in the MathPad editor. So again, I'm going to click on edit, and again, I'm finding the difference between these 2 population proportions. So to do a subscript, if I look at my options here, I can click the box that has the big rectangle with the little rectangle by it. So in the big rectangle, I'm going to put a P, and in the little rectangle box, it'll let me click on that, I'm going to put 1. Then I'm going to arrow to the right with my right arrow key, and I'm going to put subtract, and now I'm going to put P2. So same thing again, I'm going to click the big rectangle with a little rectangle down in the corner. I'm going to put in P, and actually if you use the right arrow key, it just jumps you right over to that box. This time I'm going to put a 2. Okay, then I'm going to use the right arrow key again and hit equals, and now I need to figure out the answer that I need to put in there. So we're basically taking 9.7% minus 5.2%, and we want to do the subtraction as a proportion rather than a percent. So that's 0.097 minus 0.052, which gives me 0.045. So 0.045. So this would be my answer. Now let me show you something that might frustrate some of you. A lot of people like to throw in the intermediate numbers in here, and I'm going to show you what happens when you do that, and it's not pretty. So 0.097 minus 0.052 equals 0.045. So in theory, this is definitely written all out correctly. It looks nice. In fact, if you look at the answer key for this problem, this is how it displays the answer. But when I go to submit my answer this way, it tells me it's wrong. And that's going to cause some of you to tear your hair out. Basically, WileyPlus doesn't want you to give any of those intermediate numbers. So if I go back in, and this time I'm only going to put the end answer and not the intermediate calculation, then when I submit my answer this time, I'm going to get it right. So hopefully this helps you a little bit on your homework so that you don't get overly frustrated with WileyPlus and the MathPad editor. I promise as you get used to using it, then it becomes no big deal, but there is a little bit of a learning curve there.